Welcome back to Stamps Old World UK, the channel where we explore the history, beauty, and real market value of classic and vintage stamps from around the world, with a special focus on Great Britain. Today's video is dedicated to one of the most familiar yet historically important British stamps, a stamp that many collectors have seen, owned, or even overlooked, the halfpenny green King George VI postage stamp. In this video, we will talk about its history, its design, why it was issued, how common or rare it really is, and most importantly, what its market value is today in US dollars. So stay with me until the end because understanding value is the key to smart stamp collecting. The stamp you are seeing features King George VI, who became King of the United Kingdom in 1936 after the abdication of his brother King Edward VIII. This period was extremely important in British history as the country was moving toward the Second World War and later rebuilding after it. Stamps issued during this era were not just postal tools, they were symbols of stability, monarchy, and national identity. The halfpenny green stamp was part of the definitive series used for everyday postal needs, especially for printed matter and newspapers, making it one of the most widely used stamps of its time. The design of this stamp is simple but very elegant. At the center is the left-facing profile of King George VI, engraved with great detail, showing his strong jawline and formal royal appearance. At the top of the stamp, you can see the royal crown, symbolizing the authority of the monarchy. The words postage and revenue appear on the sides, which tells us this stamp could be used both for postal purposes and for revenue or fiscal purposes. The denomination of 1/2 D is clearly shown at the bottom, surrounded by decorative elements that reflect traditional British stamp design. The deep green color was carefully chosen and is one of the classic colors associated with low-value British definitives. Now, let us talk about production and availability, because this is where many collectors get confused. This stamp was printed in very large quantities as it was meant for daily use. Millions upon millions were produced and circulated across the United Kingdom and the British Empire. Because of this, the stamp is considered common rather than rare. However, being common does not mean it has no value, especially when condition, gum, centering, and usage are taken into account. When we talk about condition, it is extremely important in determining market value. A used copy of this stamp with a clear postmark and no damage is the most commonly found version. In today's stamp market, a typical used 1/2 D King George VI green stamp usually sells for around $10 to $300 US. If the cancellation is light, attractive, or from a desirable location, the value can sometimes be slightly higher, but in most cases it remains within this range. A mint copy of this stamp, especially one that is mint never hinged with full original gum, is more desirable to collectors. In today's market, a clean mint example can generally be valued between $500 and $1,500 US. Exceptional copies with perfect centering, fresh color, and flawless gum may sometimes reach slightly higher prices when sold by reputable dealers or at auction, but it is important to be realistic, as this stamp is not rare. There are also different printings, shades, and perforation varieties that specialists look for. Some subtle shade differences in the green color can add interest and sometimes additional value, but these usually require expert identification. Plate flaws, printing errors, or constant varieties can significantly increase value, but these are much harder to find and are usually discovered by advanced collectors who study this issue in detail. So why does this stamp still matter today if it is so common? The answer is simple. This stamp represents a key period in British history and is often one of the first classic stamps new collectors encounter. It's affordable, historically rich, and visually appealing. It's also an excellent example of how stamp value is influenced not just by age, but by rarity, condition, demand, and historical significance. In today's stamp market, prices are also influenced by global demand. British stamps remain popular worldwide, especially among collectors in the United Kingdom, Europe, and North America. While this particular stamp will not make you rich overnight, it holds steady value and remains an essential part of any Great Britain or King George VI collection. Next up, the iconic British stamp from the King George VI era, the one-penny red postage revenue stamp. This stamp is one of the most recognizable definitive issues of Great Britain, and although it is often found in collections, its story, importance, and current market value in US dollars deserve serious attention. This stamp was issued during the reign of King George VI, who ruled from 1936 to 1952, a time marked by immense global change, including the Second World War and the early post-war recovery period. Stamps from this era were designed to be strong symbols of continuity and national identity, and the one-penny red stamp played a major role in everyday British postal life. It was commonly used for standard letters within the United Kingdom, which meant it circulated widely across cities, towns, and villages. The design of the one-penny red stamp is bold and instantly recognizable. At the center is the left-facing portrait of King George VI, engraved with precision and dignity. Above the portrait is the royal crown, representing monarchy and authority. On the left side is the word postage, and on the right side is the word revenue, indicating that this stamp could be used not only for mail, but also for fiscal purposes. At the bottom, the denomination 1D is clearly displayed within a circular frame, surrounded by ornamental floral details. The rich red color was traditionally used for the penny value in British stamps, making this issue part of a long-standing design tradition. Because this stamp was intended for everyday use, it was printed in extremely large quantities. Millions were produced and used throughout the country. As a result, the stamp is considered common in philatelic terms. However, common does not mean unimportant, and it certainly does not mean worthless. The value of this stamp today depends heavily on its condition, whether it is used or mint, and the quality of its centering, color, and gum. In today's stamp market, a used one-penny red King George VI stamp with a normal postmark typically sells for around $100 to $400 US. Examples with neat, light cancellations or interesting postmarks may sell for slightly more, especially if the stamp is well-centered and free of tears, thinning, or heavy ink marks. Poorly damaged copies, however, usually have little to no commercial value. Mint examples of this stamp are more desirable, particularly those that are mint never hinged with full original gum. In today's market, a clean mint copy generally ranges from $800 to $1,200 US. High-quality examples with fresh color, sharp perforations, and perfect centering can sometimes achieve higher prices when sold through professional dealers or auctions, but it is important to understand that this stamp remains widely available. Specialist collectors also look for different shades of red, printing variations, and plate flaws. Some shade differences exist, ranging from bright red to deeper carmine tones. Identifying these correctly often requires experience, comparison material, and sometimes expert certification. Rare, constant varieties or notable printing errors can significantly increase the value, but these are uncommon and should not be expected in most collections. The real importance of the one-penny red King George VI stamp lies in its role in British postal history. It represents everyday communication during a critical period in the nation's life. Letters sent with this stamp carried personal messages, official notices, and wartime correspondence, making it a silent witness to history. For many collectors, this emotional and historical connection is just as valuable as the market price. In today's global stamp market, British classic stamps continue to enjoy steady demand. Collectors from the UK, Europe, the United States, and Asia actively seek King George VI issues to complete definitive sets and historical collections. While this stamp is not a hidden treasure, it remains a cornerstone of British philately and a must-have for anyone building a serious Great Britain collection. Next up, the 1.5 penny brown postage revenue stamp. This stamp may look simple at first glance, but it carries historical importance, strong collector interest, and a clear place in the British postal system of the mid-20th century. The 1.5 penny denomination was introduced to meet changing postal rates in Great Britain during the reign of King George VI. This period, covering the late 1930s through the post-war years, was a time of adjustment, recovery, and modernization. Postal rates were revised to reflect rising costs, and stamps like the 1.5D brown became essential for standard domestic and overseas mail. This stamp was widely used on letters, printed matter, and official correspondence, making it a familiar sight across the country. The design of the 1.5D brown stamp follows the classic and dignified style of the King George VI definitive issues. At the center is the finely engraved left-facing portrait of King George VI, showing calm authority and strength. Above the portrait is the royal crown, symbolizing continuity of the British monarchy. The words "postage" and "revenue" appear clearly on either side, confirming that the stamp was valid for both postal and fiscal use. At the bottom, the denomination 1.5D is displayed inside a circular frame, surrounded by decorative floral elements. The brown color gives the stamp a warm and traditional appearance, setting it apart from the green and red lower values. Because this stamp was produced for everyday postal use, it was printed in very large quantities. As a result, it is not considered rare in general collecting terms. However, as with all classic stamps, value determines by condition, usage, and collector demand. Many examples found today show heavy cancellations, worn perforations, or color fading, which can reduce their value. In today's stamp market, a typical used 1.5-penny brown King George VI stamp usually sells for around $200 to $500. Clean, used copies with light, well-placed postmarks and strong color can sometimes achieve slightly higher prices, especially if they are well-centered and free from damage. Poor condition examples, such as those with tears, creases, or missing perforations, often have little commercial value. Mint examples are more desirable, especially those that are mint never hinged with full original gum. In current market conditions, a nice mint copy of this stamp generally ranges between $600 and $1,250. Exceptional quality examples with fresh color, sharp perforations, and perfect centering may sell for more when offered by professional dealers or at auction, but collectors should always be cautious and realistic when assessing price. Specialist collectors pay close attention to shade variations, paper types, and printing details. The 1.5D brown stamp exists in several shades, ranging from lighter brown to deeper reddish-brown tones. Identifying these shades accurately often requires experience, comparison with reference material, and sometimes expert certificates. Plate flaws and constant varieties are known, but are relatively scarce and can significantly increase value if properly identified. The importance of this stamp goes beyond its monetary worth. It represents a key postal rate and reflects the everyday communication of a nation during a challenging historical period. Letters franked with this stamp traveled across Britain and overseas, carrying personal news, business correspondence, and official information during wartime and recovery years. For many collectors, this connection to history adds meaning that cannot be measured in dollars alone. In the modern global stamp market, King George VI issues remain popular among collectors worldwide. British definitive stamps are especially sought after for building complete sets, studying postal history, and understanding the evolution of stamp design and usage. While the 1.5D brown is not a rare treasure, it is a vital piece of any serious Great Britain collection. For viewers of Stamps Old World UK, this stamp offers another valuable lesson in stamp collecting. True value comes from knowledge, careful observation, and understanding the market. Learning the realistic US dollar value of stamps like this helps collectors avoid unrealistic expectations and make informed decisions when buying or selling. If you enjoyed this in-depth look at the King George VI 1.5D brown postage revenue stamp, please like the video, subscribe to Stamps Old World UK, and share it with fellow stamp enthusiasts. In upcoming videos, we will continue exploring classic British stamps, rare varieties, and hidden details that every collector should know. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again as we continue our journey through the old world of stamps.